Are you asking for the implication of your argument?
I know what the implication is,
yeah.
But I'm just confused. Like what constitutes a locus of duty? Like if you get up in the 1AR and you're just like underneath a framework of extinction good, the app would be a good idea. Is that sufficient to affirm?
You would have to further explain your example because I don't understand the context of which your example.
Okay.
Are you saying that if I win under a specific framing mechanism, i.e. magnitude?
Do you need to win a framing mechanism, or can you just say hypothetically there's a framing mechanism that exists that affirms?
Well, I think if I prove that something does affirm, then that's sufficient.
What does it mean to prove that something affirms?
Prove that under some framework something affirms.
So under any framework, if something affirms.
Well, yeah, if the app proves that, yeah.
Does anything in the app trigger presumption of permissibility?
I don't think so, but I don't know what the one in C is.
What potential neg arguments could trigger presumption of permissibility?
I have no idea. You could read lots of things.
Are any of these arguments reasons to drop the debater?
Which arguments?
The spikes?
Yes, all of them.
Are reasons to drop the debater?
Yeah.
How is presumption of permissibility affirmed a reason to drop the debater?
I read arguments as to why if you contest spikes, then you should lose.
Contest? Wait, so I can't answer any of these?
No.
Why not?
Because then I have no chance of winning.
Where was that argument?
It's in the first point in the interview.
Where? There's 30 arguments.
Treat each of the spikes as separate offensive theory arguments, which if the neg contest is drop the debater.
Does anything in the app cause a contradiction?
What do you mean?
You said contradictions flow app.
If you introduce an argument and then I introduce an argument and they contradict, that means you err half.
So if I disagree with the app, you vote app?
No, that's not fair. The argument is if there are two conceded contradictions, then you go app.
Okay.
Or just contradictions.
The conceded contradictions. Were there any arguments that were in the doc on the interview?
Don't know.
Charter is undone there.
What?
Charter is undone.
Okay, I'll start prep.
Yes, you go for it.
I'm not sure if that's the yes as an emergent or yes as
The yes was intended to answer the latter question. And then the additional sentence, it answers the former.
Do you mind if I give you water?
I'm about to be done.
Okay. I'll wait.
Okay, 211. It'll be 3, the a priori in the middle of the plan text, the theory under review, the framing, then the advantage. Might be easier to say. Everyone ready?
I haven't gotten it. Oh, I just got it. Okay. Ready.
Cool. Everyone good? First off, the energy independence is a domestic production charging energy independence, not keeping up oil, clean, and salt renewables growth. That's like 19, the EIA published their annual energy outlook for short economy for domestic energy production is bullish more than a year ago. The EIA has projected the U.S. becoming a net energy exporter thanks to stronger crude. They expect the next year improvements balance which will dramatically implement additional 3 billion barrels per day in intermittent power requires substantial access capacity to states with power rates available. Natural gas means the biggest incremental power extremely start carbon free with the utopian injecting north symbiotic relationship gas and solar share the complementary basing on fossil fuels and peace growth through intermittent energy from pure soluble struggle economically. Subsidies are key to domestic production. Market Johnny 14 the U.S. gives away more than 20 billion in subsidies for increased fossil fuel production, banning oil and gas. One takes subsidies U.S. fossil fuel production, including natural production by 80% and oil 35 subsidies from 40 increase oil and gas production. That's key to energy independence, which reduces OPEC power and resource conflict. Airmen 19 removal U.S. petroleum increase foreign independence. America should become would become energy dependent by 2030. U.S. surpass Saudi Arabia and large producer of crude down amount moving in 2000. U.S. resource dependence pretty helpful little shrinks of OPEC. Member states seeing increased competition energy by the U.S. decreases the influence of cartel alleviation geopolitical resource based tension. The often volatile mobility southern to smooth disorder results in American energy security. OPEC uses profits to fund nuclear terrorists. 13 OPEC have track record using oil profits support activity and difficult American interests. Saudi Arabia long footage of hot soup centers and Saudi Arabia constitutes the defense source of funding a Sunni territory total dollar around the greatest patrons of as well as terrorist organizations oil profits funding use pest manipulation oil present threats international feasibility. DACA's nuclear haze 18 terrorist nuclear attack could contribute to inadvertent nuclear war. These include early warning system miscall choice act out of desperation nuclear terrorists participate eventually in massive change all of our ranks of motivation capacity to become nuclear armaments or operate 80 plant attacks on nuclear facilities. No year was without a friend. All countries from nuclear version material is real and all countries that operate terrorist nuclear attack issues combination factors special liberty flag of the first each divided states. Increased domestic production helps weather oil price shock. New hazard 19 politicians about insulating Americans will win to form oil makers disrupting geopolitics nowadays right. Benchmark oil price and these deal with tax and takers to uniform use that. Energy percent prices soaring completely cut prices by doing oil but that's producing key factors but China dependence energy delay committed to the right age of the fact that we're producing more disparate because the US will really oil shock oil price by US remain unaffected. Nuke war king ape also historic oil and major powers united US global career cover access to energy we're going to pull where it doesn't right the US deal rationally with truck breaking interested for intervention energy both could sweep across Africa and Asia and Latin America during deeper attacking with nuclear weapons at the grips of here right two country games long part is larger than need to take power electric world war still Paris potentially being around US something oil with the US and China competition arguments on general struggle to turn nasty. Next off is USMCA passes now Poland who did 4.3 Democratic legislation now the PCA passed next year to 1029 energy coalition increase lobbying recently the USMCA some next year is the time for the US and the passing impeachment coalition want to raise party other business investigating now blood criticism of the Trump market at Trump the fossil fuel lobbyist owned Congress will spend as much as industry protected subsidy. What is 17 fossil industry? The annual subsidy 700 billion cent protected subsidy amount. The industry can spend on political influence on Republicans or tributes committees or lobby Congress climate action. Note that the total public Senate votes on political hydroactive assessment. Volatile principles same climate agency when corporate headquarters on a different while fossil fuels on the place. Major political fights spill over great cooperation between Trump's and the Dems over USMCA for its fashion line 18 Trump's push to get Congress passed now for replacement part of the presidency conference for resisting stronger tactics and represent there's path fashion QNCA because of other presidency agreement through Russia's domestic politics. Rex US ag lack and market certainties ripple factor at the industry. Chris 3015 barbers are bringing around 30 days into similar ripple effect US economy and depressed farmmakers and workers will return trading relations stabilize strong farm economy USMCA for attorney we have seen install compensation we want to enter future trade agreements every new markets for US agreements to head by the US and the American agri debt state section with match 4.4 billion loss in ag exports annually. US ag exports are keep great power was multiple hot as well 17 US based many threats I sent for the run competition with Russian wild food prices and table free trade and stable competition material drugs maturation every conflict emerging markets for 2010 but US ag exports are expected to at least a period industry more. So nuclear war causes extinction star 15 nuclear war causes almost smooth humans and large staff from nuclear mass exchange nuclear pharmaceutical powers die release back carbon from the heat is making around 1,000 so there's below further cold than last actually cold really pervasive reducing water temperature rate this way for long term causes most humans and animals to start as cold growth and ensure massive amounts of chemical and radioactive toxins. Next off counterpoint text the United States federal government should end the Keystone XL pipeline and extraction of resources on tribal land including giving Trump's explicit veto power of extraction projects on tribal land that salt and makes mining sustainable by displacing it from indigenous land. Counterpoints don't affirm these they present an opportunity cost the act it's dispo I can kick if they make a permutation or theory argument other than dispo bad the case the random resolved arbitrary it doesn't make sense to resolve because we're before the resolution not over in the resolution it's obviously a question of desirability of the plan. The theory underview overviews that none of these were complete arguments with warrants they were all hidden within individual things and if you don't have every single warrant for every single argument clearly delineated on your flow you should allow new to our responses anything else incentivized and just terribly format arguments and just extend one tiny blip which links to all of their arguments because they specifically read a card that sort of normative standards are bad which was the fairness bad card they read at the app and if they extend any of these random operators or tricks or clues that they're distracting discussion of native issues which links to all their often 20C theories dependent on or one-error theories dependent on context i.e. something like font or something like font or brackets here makes you a reason to reject the argument whereas conditionality is always a a reason to reject the team, so it doesn't really make sense. 1 or 2 is skewed towards the active when the two must cover substance or overcard theories and take a collapse. First way has been advantage to the two or B point, the response by counter we knew between 1 or 2 necessitates intervention. Implications: A, reject 1 or 2, can't be legitimate. Check for B point, drop the argument, minimize the chance for round society unfairly. There's no time to. We both have 13 minutes to speak, which solves. They're often getting faster solves, and it's empirically not debaters who've been able to like answer spikes before, or who have had people answer spikes and still ring them on. Anyways, otherwise they would just put spikes in the app like result operator, and I wouldn't be allowed to answer, which would mean they'd auto lose. Which I was all their offense of 19 applies to the majority of their spikes. Contradiction depends on context. I should be able to answer based on what they triggered. So contradiction don't evaluate after 1 error. B means the negative would always lose. All insurers are counters, which doesn't matter because I'm not reading interpretation. The one layer thing wasn't contextualized. What does it mean to win on one specific layer? Until they explain this in the 1 error, you should evaluate it, and I'll just win that they're wrong on the substantive layer and beat them on theory if they read some nonsense theory. Presumption or permissibility depends on context, but it always flows negative. You say the burden to prove the app is a good idea. The counterplans are good. First, they prove an opportunity cost of the plan that was on the counterplan. Second is ground the status quo is indefensible in certain instances, especially in the context of warming where we need advantage counterplans to prove the app is a bad idea, which proves that it's sort of bad. It's not unpredictable. It's bounded by the affirmative, and they should have a reason why the counterplan doesn't solve. Go back to 1989 in deck schools. It's terrible for fairness because it means they could just go up and choose. Obviously, they're contradictory framings, and one of them automatically affirms this was embarrassing in CX, and there's no one for why it's necessarily true because they have to win their framing to win offense. The advantage or framing. Counter roll ballots to evaluate consequences. First, don't let them win the sum total, and they only have to win the unique amount solved by the affirmative filter debate through scope of solvency. There's no impact to root cause, even if they don't solve it. 2, no performative or methodological offense. It's extra topical, which is a voting issue because it explodes critical limits, fighting out of background, making any discussion qualitatively worse. Third, existential threats outweigh all of its infinite value extinction, eliminates the possibility for future generations. Air negatives of innate cognitive bias. HTTP 17 characters, more close than 90%, more close at 100%. 2 and 3 is much greater, not destroy the activities. European, the tiny fraction holds civilized histories, actual catastrophe, destroy the features, future be long and flourishing. Have more fairly extension could actually give future generations nothing essential research, less attention, more precedent chronobiasly. People underestimate risks and not many catastrophes as magnitude. These risks are not solely policies and public, but the chronobiases go. They got people become members, say blanks and RPS, low frequently Q for X and risk speeds numbers are so large. Fourth, we access the roll ballot. Nuclear war causes massive suffering and disproportionately affects natives. Proves even if they win their framing, nuclear war is still a tiebreaker. The advantage. There's no reason subsidies keep all their evidence to have fossil fuel extraction, but fossil fuel companies are rich enough to continue extracting on natives' lands. There's no because they don't have a subsidy key warrant. Their study is BS. That's Dugas 1877 serious methodological issue with the new study. A Hawthorne trials including curse, including single fossil fuel liver emissions, rising sites, biggest spelling systems, only the dollar value. The subsidies of fossil fuel producer, not the real world impact on fossil fuel production market. 3, how the production renewables can't displace fossil fuels. Booninger 19 decarbonizing means US we need to double generate capacity. After the battery storage, we not get close having when it's open to be active 24/7 journey when the solar slide 29% enough to dependence on the US would require 100,000 square miles. So then that like be used for nothing else would require 6 times as much without factoring in NIMBY problems.
Could you please send a marked doc?
I think that should be part of prep time. But
Okay.
I don't know if the judges.
Can you do it during the CX?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go CX now. Status of the counterplan? Oh, it's this one, right?
Yeah. Expected speech.
Alright, yeah. Let's see about that. So let's go to the responses on case. You say on a value debate, theory debate after the 1 error, you see neg will always lose. What's the warrant?
Because you can just like make like infinite theory arguments in the 1 error and have a chance to respond.
Why
like,
can't you just preempt those?
Well, the neg can preempt every
that's
single
fine.
possible theory.
Let's go to the argument as to why the extra T argument. Why do we care about this?
Because it detracts from discussion about subgroups.
How?
If you can just
If
claim
we win our performative offense, then why does that matter?
if you can claim offense off of anything other than top-level implementation allows you to defend literally anything outside the bounds of the resolution, which explodes.
That seems to be dependent on you winning like a T-shell that just wasn't that.
Our argument is that performative offense is not obviously not the topic.
Okay.
Like this is the T argument.
Alright, can you explain the link in the disapp?
Which disapp?
The first one?
Sure. So, subsidies in the status quo are key to U.S. energy independence. Shifting away from that causes increased reliance on oil and sort of other fossil fuels from other companies or other countries. That has 2 impacts. First is it causes nuclear terrorism because increased OPEC profits go towards terrorists to help them acquire nuclear weapons. Second is it helps, when the U.S. has energy independence, it helps us weather price shocks, i.e. instability in the Middle East, that without energy independence it would massively harm the U.S. because we would be relying on them for oil, and those cause nuclear war.
Alright, can you explain the link for the second disapp?
Fossil fuel lobbyists have massive power in Congress, which means the plan would cause a major political fight that derails passage of USMCA.
Alright, so let's go to your consequences matter argument. The extinction bad argument, like why is this offense?
What?
The 4th point under the counter roll ballot.
Yeah.
Okay, did you read the Bracey evidence?
No.
Okay. So you just read cannot weigh settle. You just said like cannot weigh settlerism, no performative offense, and extinction bad, right?
And extinction turns structural.
Okay. Yeah. All right. sounds good. The reasons to reject one of your theory were like resolvability and.
They're in the doc.
Oh, okay. Alright. It's fine. What was your response to the
You know, actually, you get one every theory.
I do?
Yeah.
Oh.
But it's not automatically dropped in data.
Oh, it's not the other class. Alright, that's fine. I don't have any questions. Starting good now. So if you responded to the arguments, how do we know if they're underwarranted?
What?
Like your argument for new turnout responses or the conditional, the qualification is that there's no warrant. But if you clearly caught them and there was a warrant, then.
Well, I caught the claims. So I was responding to the claims, but those claims do not have warrants.
Okay.
So like, for example, you said like, you can't respond to spikes and you didn't have a warrant for that. I still made a reason like, I can respond to spikes. I just don't know what the AF one is, so I can't respond to that because there isn't one, obviously.
Alright, cease prep. The order is going to be AF line review, 2 new off, the AF, the performance stuff, then the counterpoint, I guess.
Can I have 2 pieces of paper?
How much prep do you left?
130.
Wait.
I have more if you want.
Is there a doc?
Yes, please.
Oh, no.
You send me answers. I assume they're answers.
Of course.
One more time. 2 new on review. Then what?
Then the AF.
And then, is that it?
Yeah.
Wait, so yes counterpoint or no counterpoint?
No.
Interesting.
Wait, on the AF, you said, or like the actual AF, only place you're actually going to is the performance, right?
Okay, the interest should be sent.
Wait, starting on the interview, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you go a little slower on standard analytics?
I was gonna put it up, taking of the line art, so just the read sheet.
Oh, geez.
This is pretty tall.
These are good ones.
That doesn't mean anything.
Just hold on.
I'm gonna go.
I'm good.
Everything's good?
Mm-hmm.
Framing issues, you can see the infinite abuse claim that outweighs insofar as we have to read a shell for independent LVR also means you have to be dropped it. You have also conceded the independent voters, it takes out the resolvability claim because it's true of everything else. You conceded the firm up, your affirm is the status back, means you affirm on face now. You functionally just conceded valid the theory debate after the 1 hour extend the 8 point that submitted to our condemn and theory being impossible to 3 minutes. We are also extend the B point that we both do one speech on theory controls the internal and reciprocity. Your only response to the negative one, so there's no warrant for this. You can just read reject 1 hour theory for 6 minutes, so there's obviously no way that I can win it with this. So it means it's improved. I do know 200 responses because insofar as there was contextualization of this you should not get access to it. It destroys all our ground insofar as we can never engage with all the preamps that we read. The B point is clash. New 200 responses de-incentivized clash insofar as we insert better norms later in the round. Whereas if we start this conversation from the beginning of the 1AC, we get better opportunity to get better norms, which was a completely conceded argument. Which outweighs all of your arguments now. The 1 hour offs. First, interpretation of vinegar reads in all, a counterclaim, they must begin the 1C with explicit text. The standard is obviously a condo dispo and control whether the F wants it to be. If it's dispo, you must define dispo explicit as a violation is not at the top. One is stable, obviously, having a specific status is key to ensuring you don't nullify one of your arguments of tragedy, judges don't pay attention to CX, no flow. There's no risk or unclear stable, obviously, key to educational class position necessary. Winnable 2 area 2 is perhaps if I wait to CX to clarify, use the entirety of the 1C. B7 is the prep answers no for our case and read theory violates fairness since the AC is unconditional. You have the entire 6 minutes to prep, so don't be able to perpetrate the NC2 harms education less time and think it next. Off interpretation, the negative must defend unique ethical parameters for frame out strike violation. Is you deny unique ethical parameters. Standard 1 is fill it, self-education to fill it. Happens with the clash of ethical theories and education and LD and triggers and not sure that B.1 allowed not as you learn about ethical theories fill is it independent voter constraints understanding fairness and education LD is defined with NSD as values debate direct purpose of debate 2 source must history of flows structural disadvantage because the defendant NC the AC strap doesn't sheer away often collapse the negative has no disadvantage because there's limited AC arguments in choosing which means the AC will be over full this further 7 minutes time is inherently irreversible because compared to 3 minutes AC offense response to key difference insofar as is equal access to the ballot. Now, your arguments as to why time 2 is not unique. I know we have won our analysis of the structure of the 1 hour means that we can never win those arguments. The case. Extend Grando for the role of also with the best orientation resist call it operates the cycle machine frame because epistemology claim natives excluded from decision calculus. I was specifically probability claim educational spaces which the ground is experts have complicit with several grounds proven by the Banner 13 evidence which we were able to create resource institution things like employee strategies and indigenous plans and people always under to see the topic. Erasure means we uniquely prioritize set calls erasure from scholarship proven by things that teacher tiers A push textbooks abstracting for set call conversation means the after try or die comes first implications 8 point frame the role about through to consider from lens of offense could resist set calls means insofar as the negative starting point is flawed anything else direct indigenous scholarship the only ones doing that B point of vote after I know we have performed of office speech check and carbon erasure proven by reading specific gaps land acknowledgement which means with regards to the post fiat offense you could win on the form level insofar as form comes before content form shapes our ability to introduce the round to shape our orientation to the base space even if we lose some debate the language in land acknowledgement means we have done something on you and can go to this round now we'll libel arguments you say cannot wait settlers because it doesn't solve no you can see the FD he can trust settlers and those barely evidence which I always on the red patch go you can see the contextual analysis that one it seems to settle in the consideration you say performative no performative option extra key this is depend on you when the chief shield that you just did not read don't evaluate any of these paragraph theory it turns out but to get anything else again so far as performance or response to this makes absolutely no sense you say extension is bad one dependent on you when you're from down to mind two extension is whiteness never talk about the settler around so learn about how it obviously means you distract it link back to the role about even harder independently there's no impact to nuclear war undermine impact under the impact insofar as you not framed it onto the lens of extension you didn't read a counter row standard text hold them to stable accuracy insofar as you do not have that reject all of their arguments on case let's go back to the underview quickly. You have conceded that it can extend that all negs must defend the status quo with 8 point predictability of the reciprocity argument. Your only response is key to like counterpoint testing, but you have conceded the reciprocity. You do that outweighs in scope insofar as we never get access to multiple arguments. So you always do, which means you should reject counterpoints on face that takes out the counterpoint. Also, you say that there's no explanation of one layer. Is insofar as anything is articulated, such as an independent theory off this is a reason to reject them. You have conceded that you should always err toward one area theory insofar as the 2 and R dump always makes speech times impossible.
What was the drop that it warrant?
Deter future abuse. Also a time skew argument.
Okay. It'll be like the framing page, like wherever you put all the performance stuff. Then the like underview. Then the 1 AR offs in order. Everyone good?
Can you repeat that one more time?
The framing page, where like they extend the performance stuff.
Yep.
The theory underview. The shells.
Okay.
Everyone ready? Okay. Problem on the performance page is they conceded that nuclear war turns structural violence would cause massive amounts of suffering, things like famine, disease, radiation poisoning, etc., all of which would disproportionately affect Native people because they don't have the same resources. They don't have the same resources, and things like nuclear bombs would be targeted against them and cause them massive amounts of suffering, which means we access their framing, their performative stuff just literally makes zero sense. Just because you acknowledge the land does not mean it's performative, and if anything, that is a settler move to innocence because it's not doing anything to materially give that back the land. All it does is absolve you from your responsibility to sort of do anything materially towards decolonization. That's obviously not what any of your authors endorse. Just like looking it up for every single term, it is obviously distinct, and there's no impact to any of the performative stuff insofar as the sort of performance of the app is inextricably tied to the consequence of the affirmative, and they've conceded that sort of consequentialism is the frame by which you should is the sort of frame by which you should evaluate impact. These vague appeals to ethicality don't really make sense. Distinction does that way. It destroys the possibility for any future generation because there are trillions and trillions of future people that could possibly exist, and they consider you're cognitively biased towards the imagery of structural bias in the status quo because you simply cannot comprehend the magnitude of extinction, which means you should err negative. There is an impact to nuclear war. We said it caused nuclear war and explained how it turns structural bonds. We do have a counter standard text, which we'll get to on the shell, but the counter rule was to evaluate consequences, which I explicitly said in the 1C. It's not whiteness. This was just the word whiteness, and if we've won that sort of nuclear war disproportionately affects marginalized populations, it proves it's not, and we access their framing just as not. If the extinction outweighs, that means that sort of it outweighs their performative offense because there's no impact to their performative offense because them just acknowledging it doesn't change any of the material structure. There's no impact to form before content because it proves that if the speech act of the affirmative is one that kind of endorses that extinction would happen, that's a reason to reject it. There's no reason we're epistemically flawed starting point. They need to point at the specific RJ sets, and the fact that we've like, sort of counterplanned proves that we're not the sort of orientation that they're criticizing. The theory underview. Framing issues, they literally zero weren't in the 1 for why theory is a reason to drop the debate, and they conceded out of the 1AC that you should err heavily negative on 1 theory, and you should drop the argument to minimize the chance of intervention because they have two speeches, and all the 2 errors inevitably going to be new responding to all of the responding to the counter trip. That means that they have an inherent advantage and a sensitive time advantage, which flips all of their arguments for why you should err up on 1 theory because it proves they have the advantage, which impact turns all of their arguments, and they specifically conceded that it justifies drop the argument because insofar as intervention is inevitable, it means that dropping the argument minimizes the chance that the round is decided unfairly, which answers their argument. The quote 1 error's quote apparently in CX for why was drop the debater was the words deter future abuse, which is not a 1. They have zero reason why drop the debater is key to deter future abuse, and earlier any further extrapolation in the 2 is new because it screws over the 2 the drop the argument solves their offense. A point, it means I can't get access to that argument, which proves I'm deterred from reading in the future. B point is it solves time 2 because it means that the 1 is shortened because it means that argument functionally goes away, which resolves that means that argument functionally goes away, which solves that offense. The a priori that they extended. What a priori? I will stake this debate on them not being clear in the 1 when they named the a priori, and they literally just said some random word a priori and did not extend an actual argument. Even if the argument was like somewhere in the affirmative, it was literally half of the sentence hidden in the middle of nowhere, which is not a warning. Sort of doesn't answer any of those arguments, and they also conceded that they read a card that says fairness bad and that discussion should focus on settlerism, which was just a dropped argument out of the 1C, which means they don't get any of these theory arguments because they're obviously distracting from the conversation about settlerism by reading silly a prioris and silly 1 theory shells that I don't even violate. Drop the argument independently is get A point is substantive education. It deters the 1 from uplaying every single debate and allows us to return to substance. B point substantive education. How we only have 2 minutes to debate the topic. B point is proportionality. It ensures that the use is proportional. You wouldn't someone to get the death penalty just for stealing a lollipop and just be polite because I read 1 of these for you. It just means it goes away, which always means it's the most real world form of punishment. Don't evaluate after the 1AR. It means, or also if you evaluate after the 1AR, I'd still win because these shells are terrible, and you can just see that I automatically meet them and they don't have any offense on them, which shells are offense. But it also causes infinite beat, or it also means that like it causes massive amounts of beats because the 1C can't predict literally every single theory. If the 2 are 6 minutes of reject 1 theory, the app should still be able to win because that's obviously obviously a terrible argument. I couldn't fill 6 minutes of speech, fill 6 minutes of speech times with it. The clash that they assume doesn't happen because they just hide a bunch of bloody tricks in the affirmative. That doesn't give the opportunity to adequately respond to them, which proves sort of the late-breaking debates are inevitable because they're just going to go for random tricks in the one hour like this debate, which proves that it sort of doesn't access the clash options and proves that allowing me to respond is good. The counterpoint's bad thing. Drop the argument obviously takes this out. You can keep the counterpoint just start negative on the conceded dissets. The rest of also answer it. They've conceded that if the status quo is indefensible, especially in the context of this topic, because everyone agrees that warming is bad, which means outweighs their offense on magnitude. There's no impact to reciprocity. Even though I get multiple arguments, they can do things like uplayer in the one airing and do things like operators, which checks back their offense. The independent theory thing at the end just wasn't explained, and we've impact turned airing app. If these aren't complete arguments in the one airing, you shouldn't evaluate them. Theory. Top levels, they didn't have competing interrupt justification at any point in the debate. You should use reasonability. There's always always going to be something marginally that we could have done better, but that detracts from substantive debate and risk over punishing. Because if I'm like 0.1 marginally better, that doesn't justify ending the entire round, which means I'm following sufficient defense of the arguments that's sufficient to vote negative. Their spec status argument is literally like must spec status in speech as opposed to CX. All of their offense was about why you should specify in CX, which is solved by specing in the speech. There's no reason specifying like at the very top of the speech for specifying a couple words in is warranted in the 2NR, which means they don't have offense countertrip. We can specify when we read the counterclaim. That's sort of most logical because we shouldn't have to specify before we've even gotten the counterclaim because it prevents us from even knowing like if we're going to have time to be able to get to the counterclaim. Prevents us from actually formulating education. There's no impact to their Stratsky argument because you don't have to wait until CX because you just hear it, and there's no impact to those 2 minutes because you shouldn't like know every single argument I'm reading before I get to that argument for the same reason that I like don't have to disclose every single argument when you start the one you see. You don't disclose you don't start the affirmative by being like these are my 3 advantages. Yeah, they don't have a warrant that's not specific to CX. The other shall, I wrote a counter framework that was to evaluate consequences. I don't know what they think the violation is. It meets the text they're interpreted as the only stable basis for it, but if you're unsure what a unique framework is, it proves that their framework can't resolve any of their offense and it meets the spirit of their interpret. These allows philosophical clash over questions like, does extinction matter? Are future generations relevant? And it solves reciprocity because they can concede extinction first, go for impact turns, and get rid of all the offense underneath their framework, which solves all their offense.
Alright, 128. Alright. It'll be the new 2-hour responses debate, evaluate theory after the 1 AR, the straight rep shell, then the case.
So just the paradigm shit on the app,
Yeah.
and then the shell, they have to read it standard?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then the case.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, that's good. So ready?
Framing issues, if we win to evaluate the theory debate after the 1 AR, we auto win insofar as we win a run air shell. You can't evaluate any 2-hour responses, so all we have to do is win that and it's game over. Your only responses are brand new in the 2-hour, but you can see that you do not get access to 2-hour responses insofar as the qualification in the 1 NC was that if the arguments are blippy and underwarranted, but you can see that there's no brown line to what a blippy argument is in the first place. You also conceded the B point of clash that we incentivize the clash to happen more in the beginning. If you respond to F spikes, then we can talk about the spikes through the whole round, versus if you respond randomly to 2 NR, we only have 2 speeches to talk about, which controls the internal 2 better norming in the future independently independently will just respond to your new 2 hour arguments. They make no sense. Extend the you must evaluate the theory debate after the 1 hour. Extend the A point of its times cubed because 6 minute 2 hour can down the theory makes into 3 minute 2 hour impossible. Also extend the B point to be 1 speech time theory which controls the internal link to reciprocity. Your only argument is that there's a massive 1 in C because we cannot predict. You conceded the argument that you can just reject 1 hour theory for 6 minutes, which means that there's no possible way that I can possibly win on it. Insofar as that is true, then that means I have won evaluate theory debate after the 1 hour. They just didn't respond to any of the warrants. Now, this shells all we have to do is extend the interpretation that the negative must defend a unique ethical framework to clarify not sure if extend the standard of philosophical education. That happens in class of ethical theories. You have conceded this is an independent order constraint. Adjudication of everything else will respond to your only response is an I mean, but it's literally not an I mean. You read a counter framing mechanism. It's how we evaluate consequences. It is not a unique ethical framework insofar as it does not articulate the way in which consequences must be justified. It's just literally a weighting mechanism as to why extinction in the 1 in C impacts outweighs. Now you say it means it doesn't refer, but no, it doesn't. Nothing is what's labeled as a standard or a unique ethical framework, which means that there's no offense under that. Independently, you do not meet the spirit. Insofar as all of your offense is contextual, that meaning under the F framework. Extend the second point of reciprocity that allows for a structural disadvantage because we can never have to defend an AC means second tier with offense. You have conceded that there's no disadvantage to this because an unmotivated affirmative can never win. Insofar as this is true, that means you do not meet the spirit of the interpretation either because in the world of the 1 NC, we never get access to, we can never we always have to get through the entirety of the NC insofar as they did not do that. The case. The problem with the case is they just didn't extend any of the offense in the 2 hour, hold them to extending at least a single piece of offense. If anything, just presume F. Extend the you presume F insofar as you presume statements are true rather than false. Insofar as nothing in the 2 hour was extended on substance, that means it's false. Now the performance debate. The problem is you have conceded that the F deconstructs settler colonialism, so we can weigh our set called impacts of genocide against this insofar as it controls the internal into structural analysis of debate in the first place. So extend the grand O for evidence that the role of the balance to vote to the debater with the best orientation to resist that call. You have conceded the form over content distinction that we're even the specific F and land acknowledgement, or regardless of post-VR offense, we should win because it shapes our ability to introduce content within the round and controls the internal into our role of value. You can see the Bander 13 evidence, which indicates that we create current resources and institutions to teach things to employ strategy to deconstruct settler colonialism. Insofar as this is true, you have conceded that the settler colonialist genocide outweighs the nuclear war impact, and you have also conceded that the nuclear war impact is whiteness insofar as it will always distract away from instances of settler violence as an instance of settler guilt. Your only response to the 2 hours is bad. Quickly, this fairness per form of contradiction. This was not flagged as a form of contradiction extended with 2 seconds left in the 2 hour. The fairness offense was contextual to you not engaging, not me.
Good bit.